A worker picks a ripe red coffee cherry, removes its fruit, dries the seed, ships it across an ocean, roasts it without burning it, grinds it, and brews it, so someone thousands of kilometers away can drink it before work. Nothing about that chain is simple. Coffee grows within a limited tropical belt. Harvesting is labor-intensive, and many aromas created by roasting begin fading quickly. Yet coffee became one of the most ordinary rituals on Earth. Caffeine seems to explain everything. People wanted a stimulant, so the drink spread. But desire could not make a fragile tropical crop cheap, dependable, and available every morning. The real question is not why people liked coffee. It is how the world repeatedly rebuilt coffee until distance, season, price, and even freshness seemed to disappear. The object called a coffee bean is not a bean at all. It is usually one of two seeds inside a fleshy fruit, commonly called a coffee cherry. That distinction matters because the modern drink begins by destroying almost everything the plant produces around the seed. The skin and pulp are removed. Moisture is driven down. Protective layers are hulled away. Only then does the pale, hard green seed become a durable, commercial object. Roasting comes much later, usually close to the consumer rather than the farm. This film follows the history of that roasted drink, beginning with Coffea arabica and bringing in Coffea canephora, robusta, only when it changes the scale of the modern market. It does not treat every historical use of coffee fruit, leaves, husks, or caffeine as the same product. Nor does it pretend that the first people to encounter a wild coffee plant immediately invented the black beverage now poured in cafes and kitchens. A plant can exist for hundreds of thousands of years before people create a system that turns its seed into a daily habit. Genetic research places the natural formation of Arabica deep in prehistoric East Africa. The species arose when two other coffee species combined naturally, long before modern humans began cultivating it. Its richest wild diversity is associated especially with the forests of Ethiopia. But genetics cannot tell us the date of the first cup. Archaeology has not produced a neat trail of ancient roasted beans leading from a single village to the world. The secure early history of coffee drinking rests much more heavily on written evidence from across the Red Sea, in Yemen, during the 15th century. That gap has attracted a famous story. An Ethiopian goat herd named Kaldi supposedly noticed his animals becoming lively after eating red cherries. The tale is memorable because it compresses an enormous cultural transformation into one accidental afternoon. It is also late and unsupported as an account of coffee's origin. The real beginning is harder to illustrate because it involved accumulated knowledge, recognizing the plant, moving it, cultivating it, processing its fruit, heating its seeds, controlling the brew, and finding a social reason to repeat the work. In 15th century Yemen, coffee appears in accounts connected with Sufi devotional communities. The drink helped participants remain awake during nocturnal religious observances. That does not mean caffeine was unknown to the body until then, or that every early drink matched modern coffee. It means coffee acquired a defined job. It answered a recurring human problem: how to extend attention into the night without relying on an intoxicating drink. The first dependable payoff is therefore already a reversal. Ethiopia gave the world the biological inheritance of Arabica and retained extraordinary coffee knowledge and diversity. Yemen appears to have been the place where cultivation, roasting, brewing, and a repeatable social use came together clearly enough for the drink to enter written history. Coffee was not discovered in one moment. It was assembled across the Red Sea. If evidence-led food histories are your kind of story, subscribe after this first cup. The next transformation was not botanical, but social. This purpose changed the economics of preparation. A substance used once as a curiosity can remain rare. A drink tied to repeated gatherings creates routine demand. The seed had to be available on the correct nights in a form that could be stored, roasted, ground, and brewed. Farmers in Yemen's highlands cultivated coffee on demanding terrain, supported by terraces and water management traditions adapted to mountain agriculture. Traders moved it toward Red Sea ports, above all Al-Makka, whose European name, mocha, later detached itself from the port and became attached to coffee vocabulary around the world. Caffeine alone did not solve any of those tasks. The active compound could encourage repeated use, but the drink also required clean enough water, fuel, vessels, grinders, roasting skill, and people willing to organize preparation. Coffee became historically powerful because wakefulness was packaged inside a service and a ritual. The stimulant mattered, but only after communities built a dependable way to deliver it. The crucial technology was not one spectacular machine. It was the conversion of a perishable fruit into a relatively stable green seed. Fresh cherries spoil quickly. Properly processed and dried green coffee can wait. It can be bagged, counted, taxed, carried by caravan, loaded into a ship, and roasted after arrival. That separation between primary processing and final flavor creation became the hidden architecture of the entire industry. Roasting then performed a second transformation. The pale seed was heated until complex reactions produced color, bitterness, acidity, and hundreds of volatile aromatic compounds. Roasting made coffee recognizably coffee, but also started a clock. The aromas people value are chemically unstable. Once roasted, especially once ground, coffee loses volatile compounds and reacts with oxygen. The product becomes more expressive and less durable at the same moment. That paradox shaped the trade. Long-distance merchants did not need to transport a finished cup or even freshly roasted beans. They could transport green coffee, then move the most time-sensitive stage closer to the drinker. Coffee could therefore cross deserts and seas without freezing, canning, or refrigeration. Its early global advantage was not that the plant was easy to grow, it was that skilled processing divided one difficult product into two, a transportable seed and a freshly created flavor. Still, Yemen's solution only made coffee movable. It did not explain why cities would reorganize their social lives around it. For that, the drink needed a room. By the early 16th century, coffee drinking had moved beyond its original devotional settings. It spread through cities connected by pilgrimage, scholarship, commerce, and Ottoman power. Coffee reached Mecca and Cairo, and coffeehouses became conspicuous in Istanbul during the 16th century. These establishments were not simply shops selling a liquid. They were machines made of people, a repeatable setting in which one prepared batch could be sold cup by cup, while news, stories, games, music, business, and argument kept customers in the room. This solved a different obstacle. Home preparation required fuel, equipment, skill, and a supply of beans. A coffeehouse concentrated all of those costs. A customer could buy access to the drink without owning the system behind it. The same model also demonstrated coffee publicly. People saw others drink it, learned when it was appropriate, and connected its taste with sociability rather than medicine or religious discipline alone. Authorities and religious scholars sometimes objected, but the controversy was rarely just about the chemistry of caffeine. Coffeehouses gathered men outside the household and beyond tightly controlled institutional settings. They could become places where information moved quickly and reputations were made or damaged. Attempts to restrict coffee or close coffeehouses revealed the drink's success more clearly than any advertisement could. Governments do not repeatedly police an irrelevant beverage. When coffee entered European cities in the 17th century, merchants and consumers adapted an institution that had already developed in the Islamic world. London coffeehouses are often celebrated as nurseries of journalism, science, insurance, finance, and political discussion. Those associations were real in particular places, but they can produce another misleading origin story. Coffee supposedly created the modern rational West, by replacing alcohol with alert conversation. The evidence is less tidy. Europeans did not simply stop drinking beer, wine, or spirits. Coffeehouses served particular social groups and excluded many others, especially women as customers in numerous settings. Tea, chocolate, sugar, tobacco, and alcohol continued to shape consumption. Coffee did not single-handedly cause the Enlightenment, capitalism, newspapers, or sober work. What it did provide was a flexible commercial space built around wakefulness, warmth, and repeated small purchases. The room multiplied demand. It did not multiply trees. By the late 17th and early 18th centuries, European trading powers faced a strategic problem. A profitable appetite was growing, but much of the supply still passed through Arabian and Red Sea networks. If coffee remained tied to Yemen, merchants could trade in it, yet they could not fully control its production. The obvious next step was to move the plant. That sounds like the moment coffee became global. In fact, it created the deepest moral reversal in the story. Coffee plants and viable seeds traveled into new tropical territories through several routes, some documented clearly and others wrapped in heroic smuggling legends. The important change was not the adventure of a single seed carrier. It was the decision by imperial states and chartered companies to reproduce Yemeni coffee agriculture inside territories where they controlled land, taxation, shipping, and rehab. The Dutch established coffee production in Java in the early 18th century. Java was not empty land waiting for a useful crop. Coffee was inserted into existing villages and political structures. In the Priangan Highlands, and later under broader colonial systems, Javanese cultivators were compelled through obligations imposed by local and Dutch authorities to deliver an export crop for distant consumers. The Netherlands did not merely acquire a plant, it built a mechanism for transferring the burden of cultivation to colonized households while directing the beans and revenue outward. French production expanded in the Caribbean. Coffee fitted mountainous zones that were not always ideal for sugar, allowing plantation agriculture to climb slopes and occupy new land. In Saint-Domingue, now Haiti, coffee output rose extraordinarily fast during the 18th century. By 1789, the colony supplied roughly 3/5 of world coffee, according to economic historical estimates. That quantity was not the triumph of fertile soil alone. It was produced within one of the Atlantic world's most violent slave societies. Enslaved Africans cleared land, planted trees, maintained them, picked cherries, processed the crop, carried loads, and endured punishment and deprivation so that European consumption could expand. Coffee's declining price cannot be separated from this labor regime. The coffeehouse had created a compelling market, but the plantation made the cup cheaper by forcing much of its real human cost onto people who could not refuse the work. This is the midpoint reversal. Coffee did not become a mass drink simply because more people discovered that they enjoyed it. Demand had already been proven. The decisive expansion came when empires broke Yemen's geographic concentration and rebuilt coffee inside systems of slavery, forced cultivation, monopoly, and colonial shipping. The plant's escape was a liberation for merchants, not for the people ordered to grow it. The Haitian Revolution shattered the leading slave colony and created the first independent Black Republic in 1804. Coffee production did not vanish from Haiti, but the old Saint-Domingue export machine was broken. Global demand, however, remained. Rather than ending the coercive phase of coffee, the disruption redirected investment and opportunity toward other producers. Brazil would turn that opening into a scale the coffee world had never seen. Coffee expanded through southeastern Brazil during the 19th century as international consumption grew, especially in the United States and Europe. By the middle of the century, Brazil was producing about half of the world's coffee. Around 1900, its share was closer to 3/4. These figures describe more than agricultural success. They reveal how thoroughly one country's land, labor, transport, finance, and politics became organized around a drink consumed largely elsewhere. The early Brazilian coffee boom rested heavily on enslaved labor. Plantations spread through the Paraíba Valley and other regions, cutting into forests and exhausting soils before cultivation moved toward new frontiers. Enslaved men, women, and children performed the repetitive seasonal work that machinery could not remove: tending trees, harvesting cherries at the correct stage, moving the crop, and processing it for export. Brazil continued slavery until 1888, later than any other country in the Americas. After abolition, coffee did not become a simple free labor industry overnight. Planters and governments promoted immigration, especially to São Paulo, while labor arrangements remained unequal and frequently coercive in practice. Railways linked interior plantations to the port of Santos. Credit connected harvests to foreign buyers. Warehouses, grading systems, brokers, and shipping schedules turned millions of separate cherries into standardized export lots. This infrastructure changed the meaning of cheap coffee. A low retail price looked like evidence that the product itself had become easy. In reality, the difficulty had been distributed across a larger system. Ecological costs remained on producing land. Harvest risk remained with growers and workers. Ships and railways reduced transport cost. Large roasters blended beans from different places to deliver a consistent flavor even when harvests varied. Consumers encountered the final uniform product, not the instability behind it. Brazil's dominance also produced a new problem: oversupply. Coffee trees take years to mature, and farmers cannot instantly switch production on and off when prices change. A wave of planting can create abundance several seasons later, pushing prices down. Governments and producer groups repeatedly tried to manage stocks, restrict exports, destroy surpluses, or support prices. The famous morning cup was already linked to financial decisions made years before it was brewed. Yet even this enormous plantation and transport system did not fully create modern coffee. In many households, buyers still purchased green beans and roasted them at home, or bought roasted coffee from local dealers. Quality varied. Adulteration was possible. Roasting over an open pan or small device demanded attention and produced uneven results. The global market had mastered supply, but the final transformation remained inconsistent. The next breakthrough would occur after the beans reached consuming cities. Industrial roasting changed coffee from an ingredient requiring household skill into a branded product promising repeatability. Larger rotating roasters heated beans more evenly than many domestic methods. Gas and later improved controls made roast management more predictable. Grinding machinery, factory blending, printed packaging, and expanding retail networks allowed companies to sell not merely coffee, but a standardized expectation. Standardization mattered because coffee is variable by nature. Species, variety, altitude, weather, soil, ripeness, processing, storage, roast, grind, water, and brewing all alter the cup. A 19th or early 20th century brand could not eliminate those differences, but it could hide some of them through blending and darker roasting. Beans from multiple origins could be combined so that one harvest's weakness was softened by another. The package became a promise that the next purchase would resemble the last. That promise changed purchasing behavior. A customer no longer needed to judge an unfamiliar green seed, trust a local roaster, or interpret every uneven batch. A printed name could stand between the buyer and agricultural variation. Industrial coffee companies gained power precisely because they translated a crop with thousands of possible outcomes into a narrow, repeatable flavor that could be advertised nationally. Packaging addressed coffee's chemical weakness. Green coffee travels comparatively well when dried and protected, but roasting creates fragile aroma compounds and porous beans filled with carbon dioxide. Oxygen, heat, moisture, and time dull the result. Sealed tins, improved wrapping, vacuum methods, and eventually one-way valves did not make roasted coffee permanent. They slowed the loss and allowed factories to roast farther from the moment of brewing without surrendering all consistency. This changed where value accumulated. Producing countries usually exported green coffee, the stable, unfinished seed. Importing countries increasingly performed roasting, blending, branding, packaging, advertising, and retail. The stages where a commodity became a recognizable consumer product. A sack leaving Ethiopia, Java, Brazil, Colombia, or another origin could lose its visible identity inside a blend, while the name on the tin acquired customer loyalty. Soluble coffee pushed the separation even further. Early instant products existed before the First World War, but military demand demonstrated the value of coffee that required almost no equipment, skill, or cleanup. Later industrial processors brewed coffee in factories and removed water to create a shelf-stable powder or granule. The consumer no longer needed a grinder, a roaster, or even a brewing device beyond a cup and hot water. Instant coffee did not replace roasted and ground coffee, and its taste was often criticized. Its historical importance lies elsewhere. It proved that the habit could survive radical changes in form. What consumers demanded was not always a particular bean or brewing ritual. They also wanted dependable stimulation, warmth, portability, speed, and a familiar pause in the day. By the mid-20th century, coffee had become compatible with factories, offices, military rations, diners, domestic kitchens, vending machines, and later, global cafe chains. The product was no longer merely transported across distance. It was engineered for different schedules. That sounds like the completion of coffee's transformation. But the modern chain contains one more reversal. The part of coffee that travels best is usually the part worth least. Walk backward from a retail cup. The price includes rent, wages, equipment, energy, taxes, service, marketing, and the risk of running a business. Walk backward from a supermarket package and the price includes roasting, quality control, packaging, distribution, advertising, and retailer margin. Continue backward to the farm and the object changes. The branded drink becomes green coffee priced through a volatile international market, adjusted for quality and origin, but still exposed to commodity cycles. This geographical division is one of coffee's greatest logistical achievements and one of its most persistent inequalities. The crop is grown mainly in tropical producing countries, while much consumption and many high-value activities remain concentrated elsewhere. FAO and UN trade analyses emphasize that coffee is commonly exported early in the value chain. Producing countries therefore ship a product that is heavy, agriculturally risky, and unfinished, while a significant portion of later value is created after import. Here is the second wind reveal. The same technical decision that made coffee global, the decision to ship it as stable green seed and create much of its flavor later, also helped separate agricultural risk from consumer value. Freshness was protected, distance was conquered, but the chain made it easy for the place that grows coffee to disappear behind the place that roasts and sells it. The arrangement is not absolute. Producing countries have domestic roasters, cafes, instant coffee factories, specialty exporters, and powerful consumer cultures. Ethiopia, Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and many others are not merely farms serving foreign drinkers, nor do all farmers occupy the same economic position. But the broad structure remains visible. Millions of growers manage climate, disease, land, and harvest risk, while the green seed allows roasting and branding to be postponed until the coffee is close to wealthier markets. The international coffee agreements of the 20th century attempted, at different times, to stabilize trade through export quotas and cooperation between producing and consuming countries. When the quota system collapsed in 1989, prices fell sharply during subsequent crises, exposing how vulnerable growers could be to oversupply and market reform. A cheap cup in a consuming country could coexist with a farm price too low to maintain trees, hire labor securely, or invest in the next harvest. Coffee's timescale intensifies this imbalance. A retailer can change a menu price tomorrow. A farmer makes decisions about trees whose productive future stretches across years. When prices rise, new planting cannot fill the market immediately. When prices crash, uprooting trees destroys future capacity. The chain therefore rewards actors able to store coffee, hedge prices, blend origins, or wait, while many growers must sell because household expenses and the next farm cycle cannot wait. Specialty coffee later challenged part of the anonymity built by industrial blending. Roasters and cafés began emphasizing farm, region, variety, processing method, roast date, and traceability. This restored information the older commodity system often erased. In the best cases, closer relationships and quality premiums can return more value to producers. But a story printed on a bag is not proof of equitable payment. Traceability, bargaining power, long-term contracts, land rights, and transparent prices matter more than romantic language about origin. The system's success now creates a final danger. Coffee looks uniform on the shelf, while the biological foundation underneath it is not. Arabica is prized for many flavor profiles, but cultivated Arabica has limited genetic diversity compared with the wider diversity preserved in Ethiopian forests and collections. That narrowness is partly the result of its unusual evolutionary origin and partly the consequence of global expansion from a restricted set of cultivated plants. A crop can cover millions of hectares and still rest on a surprisingly small genetic foundation. Disease revealed this vulnerability dramatically in the 19th century, when coffee leaf rust devastated Arabica plantations in Ceylon and other parts of Asia, helping drive major shifts in plantation crops and coffee geography. The modern industry uses breeding, resistant varieties, farm management, surveillance, and chemical or biological controls. Yet rust and other threats remain. Climate change adds pressure by altering temperature, rainfall, pest ranges, and the suitability of established growing zones. Robusta became essential to modern scale, partly because it can perform under conditions different from Arabica and generally carries greater resistance to some stresses, though it faces its own risks. It is central to soluble coffee and many espresso blends, and is especially important in countries such as Vietnam. The modern market is therefore not one plant conquering the world unchanged. It is a managed compromise among species, varieties, qualities, prices, environments, and industrial uses. Current global production is measured in roughly 180 million 60-kilogram bags in a strong recent coffee year. Behind that abstraction are millions of farming households and workers. Harvesting remains difficult to automate on steep terrain and where selective picking is required. Coffee's ordinary appearance still depends on repeated human judgments: which cherry is ripe, how long to dry, whether fermentation has gone too far, how to sort defects, when to sell, how to roast, and how to brew. That is why the first image, the worker picking one red cherry, contains the whole answer. Caffeine explains why the drink can be useful. Coffeehouses explain how a social habit multiplied. Colonial transplantation explains how supply escaped Yemen. Slavery, forced cultivation, and unequal labor systems explain much of the historic fall in price. Railways and steamships explain volume. Industrial roasting and packaging explain consistency. Green bean trade explains distance and the geography of value. Genetics and climate explain why the system remains fragile. Coffee became ordinary by hiding extraordinary coordination. A cup can now appear in seconds because the slow work has been moved elsewhere, into years of tree growth, a narrow harvest window, processing yards, drying beds, mills, warehouses, ports, commodity contracts, roasting plants, laboratories, distribution centers, cafés, and kitchens. The modern consumer sees hot liquid. History sees a chain built across continents, repeatedly redesigned whenever one limit, spoilage, monopoly, cost, inconsistency, or time stood in the way. So the world was not conquered by a magical bean, a lively goat, or one ingenious merchant. It was conquered by a sequence of human systems, some creative, some coercive, many still unequal. The red cherry at the beginning never stopped being difficult. We simply became very good at making its difficulty invisible before the cup reached the table.